Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Merit Janow, Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs, and I'm really delighted to welcome you to our lecture this afternoon in discussion with Governor Gary Herbert, the Governor of Utah. We really thank him and members of his staff for coming to SIPA. As you know, SIPA deeply engages issues around governance, urban policy, management of public services, and the range of issues faced by states and cities, from energy and transportation to public health, the environment, disaster management, sustainable development, civic participation, and a broad range of governance issues. We have a concentration here, which we've had for many years, on urban and social policy. And so our students are not only learning about the complexity of managing cities and states, but of course are preparing themselves for careers in public office and in governance at all levels. We're proud to have a number of former elected officials and government leaders on our faculty, including in our room today, and we count amongst our alumni mayors of two of America's largest cities, New York and Los Angeles, by way of an example. We also at SIPA have a very close relationship with other parts of the university and with the Department of Political Science. Many of our faculty teach and do research both at SIPA and political science, and I'd like to extend my appreciation to Professor Robert Shapiro of the Department of Political Science, who's joined us today to lead the panel discussion with the governor following his remarks. And most of all, it's a real privilege to welcome Governor Herbert to SIPA. He's been a Utah governor since 2009. Before that, he was lieutenant governor for 5 years and a member of the Utah County Commission. Importantly, in July of this year, he became chair of the National Governors Association, which is really a very important organization of bipartisan governors that meets regularly to share ideas and best practices and discuss matters of national policy. And as head of the NGA, the governor has set an agenda to highlight state-based solutions for enhancing state and federal partnerships. And as we all know, states often are the laboratories in this country for successful new ideas and solutions. This is enormously important as we think about the future of the United States. In his own state, the governor has focused on economic development and on identifying ways to drive business and innovation while expanding opportunities in international markets. We look forward to his thoughts. We're very grateful that you've taken time to join us, Governor Herbert.
Well, thank you, Dean Janow. I'm honored to be here with all of you and be at this wonderful university and participate here with SIPA today, and have some of my staff members here with me, my chief of staff and members of my Office of Economic Development, and we've been very impressed so far. Thank you very much for your cordial hospitality that you've given to us. Let me just mention a few things here, and I know we want to get to some questions. I'll take about 20 minutes here to give you a little bit of my philosophy of life, and certainly from a political standpoint, and what I think about the National Governors Association as an organization and its role in today's political environment. One, I'm honored, as the Dean has said, I'm the chairman of the National Governors Association. And that's an honor that I'm grateful for and humbled about. I have people all the time ask me, how was it you were able to get, the 50 governors of America to vote for you and support you as the chairman of this bipartisan organization? And I've thought about it a lot because it is quite an honor, and it's come to me, I'm the only governor not running for president. And so I was available. But it's an honor. Again, I think the states, as the dean has said, the innovators of creative solutions, of finding ways to solve the problems of the electorate, is in fact alive and well in the states. Not so much in Washington, D.C., but certainly in the states of this great country. Let me just tell you again a little bit about my own philosophy, and I'll tell it to you this way. I'm a Republican. I come from a pretty red state in Utah. But even though I'm conservative in principles, and I subscribe to the platforms of the Republican Party, I wouldn't be one, I tend to be moderate in tone. So conservative in principle, moderate in tone, and inclusive in process. I think we ought to, one, be moderate when we talk to each other. I think it's hard to get converts to your way of thinking if you're too shrill. We see a lot of the shrillness in the political arena out there today. I'm not sure that's helping. In fact, if anything, it's off-putting. And some of our young people, in fact, are saying, why do I want to be involved in politics? It seems to be ugly and mean-spirited. And unfortunately, it is in too many instances. Likewise, I think it's important, if we are going to be a representative of the people, which is kind of how our Constitution is set up, we are a republic, it ought to be in our process of developing policy inclusive in that process, to hear different points of view and let us reason together and develop policy in some kind of an inclusive process. Everybody's voice ought to be heard and ought to be respected and considered as you develop policy. That's how I try to approach governance in the state of Utah, and I think that's really how most governors tend to be when it comes to governing their states. They may be partisan in their elections, but tend to be a little more moderate in their tones and try to be inclusive in their process. I think that's the way all elected officials should be. Now, as a partisan, I am a Republican, but I've suggested to many other governors and members of Congress and the Senate and even to the President, I said, we ought to campaign. I understand the need to have a campaign that's partisan, but after we get elected, why don't we all just throw away our partisan labels and all join the common sense party? Because most of the solutions of the challenges that we face are based on some just common sense ideas. And it shouldn't matter which side of the aisle the common sense comes from. We ought to embrace common sense and see if we can't come together. I've used that, I think, to some success. The state of Utah, I'll brag a little bit about that as we go forward here. But, you know, to thine own self be true, William Shakespeare said, and I think that ought to be part of what we do in politics and forget some of the partisan bickering. I think we'd get better outcomes. Now, as the chairman of the National Governors Association, I've come up with an initiative. Every chairman has an initiative, and some is on education, some is on economic development, some of it's on, we had one on hiring the disabled and make them a bigger part of our workforce. All good initiatives. I came up with an initiative that I think is one that's timely, and it really has to do with the state finding solutions and improving lives. I do believe, as Judge Reinstein said way back when, that states are the laboratories of democracy, that we ought to remember that. He talked about that in his ruling. He said that we can have states experiment and try different ways of doing things without, you know, collapsing the republic. It's like 50 little pilot programs going on out there all the time. And that concept is one that we ought to go back to and understand and revere and adhere to. So States Finding Solutions, Improving Lives is the title of my initiative. And really what we're going to try to do over this next year is highlight the great solutions that are coming from all of the 50 states and our 5 territories. Again, Republican, Democrat alike, their states are finding answers to some of the challenges they face, uniquely so in their states. Now, this is the way it was envisioned in the beginning. Most of you know from your history books that when we had the miracle at Philadelphia, as it's referred to, and we created the Constitution 230 some odd years ago, that Benjamin Franklin was, as they were finished up, a lady approached him and said, "What kind of a government did you give us, Dr. Franklin?" He said, "It's a republic, if you can keep it." And the challenge is that we forget sometimes that it is a republic. It's not just a pure democracy, it is a democratic republic where we should represent the views of the people. And James Madison, in trying to get the Constitution supported by the 13 colonies, the 13 states, and get their support, in Federalist 45, he said to the states, in essence, because they were concerned about this new change that's going to give them a stronger centralized government. We need your vote to ratify it. So he says, states, I know you've been used to your independence under the Articles of Confederation, and you're autonomous out there, but this is a change. But not to worry, because he said the powers we've given to this new federal government, this central government, the powers we've given under this Constitution are few and defined. Few and defined. He then went on to say the power we've given to the states, though, are numerous and indefinite. Well, we've kind of lost our way. As you've seen over the years, we have more power, it seems like, that we have in Washington, D.C. than what really has been observed in the states. And let me just give you an illustration of that point. Here's a fact. I had my Office of Management Budget go back and total up all the state budgets, all 50, combine them, tell us how much money are being spent in all the states collectively, representing the people. And it totals out to be $1.7 trillion. Not a small number, $1.7 trillion. But as you probably know, here a few weeks back, the president proposed to the Congress his budget, which is $3.99 trillion. Sounds almost like $4 trillion, which is 2 times larger than the combined spending of the states, plus an additional $500 billion to do with what you want. If you take that number and look at it and you find that there's $500 billion that comes and generates taxes, they all come from the people, right? From the states, goes to Washington, D.C., then has been redirected with usually some strings attached to it, back to the states and say, we have shared responsibility, you spend it on these programs and add it to your budget. At $500 billion, if it's subtracted out of the state budgets from 1.7, it now goes to $1.2 trillion, and it's now 3 times more money being spent in Washington, D.C. than the states. That's an astounding number. That's an astounding comparison when James Madison said the powers given to the federal government are few and defined, and the powers given to the states are numerous and indefinite. Somewhere along the line we kind of got this thing turned upside down. And so I'm suggesting to the states and to the governors that we need to, in fact, help push back on the federal overreach. It doesn't matter, it's not a partisan issue. I've talked with many Democrat governors that say, Gary, I don't like the federal government, tell me how to run my state any more than you like them, tell me how to run Utah. And we've asked, the people of America are asking too much out of Washington, D.C., asking them to do too much that they're inefficient at doing, and really, as you see the paralyzation and the dysfunction in Washington, D.C., they're not capable of delivering. So this initiative, I think, is going to help us at least highlight the success of the state and hopefully have the people of America say, you know what, we don't need Washington to take care of us from cradle to grave. Let's look to our states. Whatever the issues are, the states probably are in much more nimble position to deliver and provide the solutions. Now, I can tell you that if you look at the states, and I'll just mention a few here, the states have been very good at, in fact, finding solutions. We don't have time to go through a lot of these because I know you have questions and we'd like to have a little more dialogue here with you today. But let me just give you one that's kind of top of mind that happened in my state on a very difficult emotional issue, which had to be with anti-discrimination when it comes to LGBT rights and anti-discrimination when it comes to religious rights, that seem to somehow come together and kind of bump up against each other. And so as we had that issue came forward, and I know other states are struggling with this around the country, we got people from all sides around the table, an inclusive process, wanted to get their opinions on what do you feel like you need to have so you're not discriminated on your religious persuasion. For the gay community, what can we do to make sure that you're not discriminated when it comes to housing and employment and those kinds of things. And we had that discussion. Then the fact that we were able to work together for a common goal enabled us to work with the legislature to get something done. We had religious leaders that came to the table. We had the gay rights leaders that came to the table. We met with legislative leadership and decided, and I said, you know what, to me, what we need to do is put this all in one bill. The problem of some states, they've had one bill for religious freedom, one bill for gay rights. And one passes or doesn't pass, or it's not exactly right. We decided to combine it into one bill. So either you're going to get one bill through that both of you agree, and maybe there's some compromise and give and take, but we're not going to have competing bills. And fortunately for us in the state of Utah, we had this bill called SB 296, which passed virtually unanimous in the House and the Senate, and I was pleased to sign it into law. And really, in many ways, has been a good example to the rest of the country of how we can come together on a very difficult and emotional issue. And that's just one example of, again, states working together. Henry Ford once said, if we're all moving together, if we're all moving together forward, then success will take care of itself. So the idea of coming together is a good principle to help us solve problems. Let me tell you another challenge that we have working with the federal government. The challenge with the federal government is that they have to look at things in kind of a one-size-fits-all mentality. They can't treat one state different than another, and that's probably understandable. But we all are different in the states. We have different demographics, different challenges, uniqueness in our regions, our people. My state, for example, is a very young state, the youngest in America. Our median age is 29.2 years of age. My neighboring state of Arizona is at the other end of the spectrum. So when it comes to health care issues, for example, I've got prenatal challenges, they've got end-of-life issues. So our health care programs are different. Medicaid has been something we've had in Utah since the late 1960s, about 1968. It's an issue for every state, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of our budget. It's part of the discussion we've had of the Affordable Care Act. In Utah, we are trying to find better ways to keep the costs of health care down and still make sure that those who are particularly most vulnerable amongst us have access to health care. Well, we came up with an idea that, you know, why don't we now in this electronic age go paperless? I know you're all mostly paperless, and we thought it was a great idea, and it saved the state of Utah $6.3 million to go paperless is what we would estimate. Not only did it save us money, but it was better ways to communicate. We know if you got the mail, and you can just return to sender and respond back. A much better way to communicate. We recognize there may be some out there that don't have access to the internet for whatever reason, so we made it voluntary. If you choose to do that, fine. If you don't, that's okay too, but we're going to find a way to streamline and make it more efficient. So we went to the Department of Health and made that proposal. Great idea. Can you let us go paperless? Because the law requires you to do the old snail mail paper. We thought logic was on our side. We thought it was intuitive that this would be a better way to do it. But after 9 months of discussion, 9 months of discussion with the federal government, I got a denial sent to me that you can't do it, and it was sent to me by email. I mean, incredible. And literally, I ended up having to take and go meet with President Obama and say, I've got this great idea. Tell me what you think. Went through the issue, and he says, Gary, I think it's a good idea, particularly if it's, as long as it's voluntary, because I don't want anybody left out. He says, no, it'd be voluntary. He says, I think it's a great idea. I said, would you mind talking to your Department of Health, because I've been turned down. Now, I can tell you, when the President speaks, things happen, and he did call the Secretary of Health at the time, and later that day I got a written note saying, we're going to work with you and get this resolved, and we got approval for it. But does it take a governor to have to meet one-on-one with the President of the United States to bring some common sense solutions to some of the challenges we face in our respective states? I would hope not. It certainly is inefficient if that's what we've got to do. But we've had a lot of great successes. I won't take time just because of time, but let me just mention a couple. They're not just limited to Utah. In Wyoming, for example, Governor Matt Mead has worked to pursue shale energy development. And what he's done is, for the first in the nation, he made a requirement that operators disclose the chemical additives that they use for hydraulic fracturing. And that's to make sure that we knew what was going into the soil and not pose a threat for water quality. The EPA, by the way, has just given a clean bill of health on hydraulic fracking here just a few months ago. In Oregon, they've worked to transform their Medicaid program that's been established. They've established there called coordinated care organizations, which are networks of health care providers that work together and with their local communities and help people who receive health care through their Oregon health care plan. And this program is designed to focus on the prevention aspects of health care. Too much of our health care is to help people after they're sick and not enough focus on prevention. Let's help you not to get sick in the first place. Not only is it better for your health, but it's cheaper in the long haul to do that. So this is something they've developed. They have now 16 of these COs, they call them, in the state of Oregon, which is a new breakthrough as far as a better way to administer health care and have a healthy population. Virginia has improved its tracking and reporting of statewide business incentives. Most states have some kind of incentive program to encourage the entrepreneur and the business community out there, but sometimes they don't do a good enough analysis to see is the cost, the benefit worth what we've given or the incentive program we have in a state to help these businesses. And they've developed a new program of analysis. They have over 300 now projects that they've analyzed over the last dozen years. And their ratio, they found out the benefit to ratio for the state's business incentives is $9.20 returned to the taxpayer for every dollar that they've invested in their incentive. Again, a good way to track the taxpayers' dollars and make sure they're getting good bang for the buck. Last but not least, I'll just mention Kentucky. My friend Governor Steve Beshear down there, again, trying to work out of the recession, knowing that the workforce needs some help. Sometimes it needs retooling, new retraining, new education, new skills. And he put together what's called Work Smart Kentucky, designed to help the state become more globally competitive and incentivize businesses to invest in the local workforce, not just in the business, but in the workforce itself. And they've developed a one-stop shop where people that are unemployed can go there and get help and advice and counsel on how to get them back into the workforce and help them find jobs. And this Work Smart Kentucky reflects what's happening now in a number of states as we learn from each other, share best practices, and copy or emulate, revise, and improve, what's taking place in the states. So the list could go on, and at the end of this next year, we're going to have a book of success stories from all the 50 states and our 5 territories, giving examples like I've given here today of these great success stories from these states that are out there finding solutions and improving people's lives. Let me just mention here, kind of as I wind up here, Utah has been blessed. There's no other way to say it other than the fact we've had great success. And when I came in 6 years ago as the governor of the state of Utah, the recession was at its greatest depths. Our unemployment rate was approaching 9%. You all probably know about the challenge we've had, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And people are out of work and we're hurting. So we set as a goal in our state that we said we're going to be bold about this and do whatever it takes to make us, as Utah, the best performing economy in America. Now that's pretty bold, and I expect that if I ask you to take a test and said, where do you think the best performing economy in America is, probably very few of you, unless you've been doing some research, would say Utah. But that was our goal. And the good news for us is after doing a lot of work and empowering the private sector and making sure the government was efficient, the Department of Labor Statistics for the last 7 months in a row has identified Utah as the place that's creating more jobs per capita than any place in America today. Our unemployment rate's at 3.7%. We have significant success in all sectors of our economy that are growing again. We focus on 7, but we're a free market state, and our economy is doing very, very well. Our challenge now is we have so many people employed that companies are having a hard time, employing people. And so we are re-emphasizing education in our state and raising the bar on educational achievement to make sure that our labor force has the skills that line up with the demands of the marketplace. We also said we wanted to be a premier global business destination, recognizing that 95% of the customers of America live outside the borders of Utah, or of America rather. And so we are uniquely suited as a state that speaks 130 languages, the most bilingual state in America, to actually go outside of the borders of America and do business internationally. And we've increased our international business faster than any state in America, taking advantage of what we have as strengths in Utah, unique to Utah. And we just came back from Hong Kong and had a great success there. We've been to Israel, Portugal, Beijing, Shanghai, Mexico, Brazil. And our international trade is really booming now, helping with our economic opportunities in the state of Utah. We've built that on a foundation that I think is important to appreciate and understand. And that's what I call efficiency in government. A government is inefficient. Why? Because it's a monopoly. It has no competition. And if you run out of money, there's always plenty more to get from the taxpayers. So you're not spending your own money. There's always a tendency to spend more of other people's money than you'd spend of your own. That's just probably human nature. Government is very labor intensive. We don't make anything. We just provide services. We help facilitate sometimes. So I came in with the idea that we're going to make Utah government more efficient than it's ever been before. And I set a goal 2 years ago to find 25% more efficiencies in what has been recognized as the best managed state in America by the Pew Center, to see if we can find even better, push the envelope, see what we can do to find more efficiency. We've embraced technology. We have 1,100 of our services online. We're doing better service with fewer employees. And so today I'm pleased to tell you that we have fewer state employees in the state of Utah today than we did back in the year 2002 when we hosted the Olympics. And so you have to go back to 2001 to find a number larger. So we've shrunk labor. At the same time, our population has grown by about 700,000 people. So we're serving more people with less people, finding efficiencies in government. So the business community says, wow, this is great. Our taxes are low. Our regulations have been reformed. The government's not sucking the money away from the private sector. And that's why Steve Forbes says that Utah, the most business-friendly state in America today, 4 out of the last 5 years. So the success is there, and the proof is in the pudding that states actually can lead the way and find success in what we're doing. So we're looking to partner with people. We want to make sure that we work together in a collaborative fashion. Our initiative here is designed to, in fact, have states share their successes and their best practices. We as the National Governors Association get together on 2 major conferences where we have governors only, where we get behind closed doors. We can say anything we want and how we want to say it. There's no press. There's no staff. It's just governors sharing some of their challenges that they find unique to their state and asking others in the room, tell me what you're doing about this issue. How are you addressing it? What is your solution? What could I learn from your state? And see if we can't share best practices and really the concept of federalism, which is about the states. It's not about the federal government. The states leading out is something that I think we can bring back into vogue and will help us as Americans pay less money to Washington, D.C., help them balance their budget, and get better programs and solutions at the state level. So that's our hope, and that's what our initiative is about. And I think it's time that we put, the states back in the driver's seat and see if we can help drive this country in the right direction and bypass some of the dysfunctionality that we all see and observe and are concerned about and maybe frustrated by in Washington, D.C. So thanks for your attention. Honored to be here with you today, and now we'll, I guess, take some questions.
I want to thank the governor for his excellent presentation. His citing the recent economic statistics in Utah is in some sense in my view, a little bit of an understatement, only in the sense that if you think about when was the last time the national unemployment rate was anywhere on the order of 3.7. It was 3.9 during a short period during the Bill Clinton administration. Imagine what political life would be in the United States right now, especially the current political campaign, if the unemployment rate were as low as 3.7%. Actually, the rate was as low as 3.4% earlier in Utah, so it edged up a bit. It's very tempting to attribute this, in my view, and for me to attribute this to not so much the moderation that the governor emphasized, but I would emphasize the word pragmatism. And he gave a good example with regard to the combining the LGBT rights bill with the religious rights bill, and that was it's a very pragmatic thing to do. I was talking with the governor earlier. This pragmatism, in my view, showed in a very substantial way in the way the state handled dealing with the expansion of Medicaid. And I'd like to ask the governor if he could just kind of explain his thinking about that very briefly so we can get on to other questions.
Well, thank you, Bob. Again, the challenge you see in the states, we have about 24 states that have not adopted Medicaid expansion. And it comes with some of the flaws in the Affordable Care Act, coupled with the Supreme Court decision. The Affordable Care Act was challenged at the court level on a violation of the Constitution and the Commerce Clause, that you shouldn't have to buy something you don't want to buy, the force of buying a product. And when it went to the Supreme Court, the argument was changed in that this is not a penalty but a tax, and therefore it's constitutional under the tax. The Supreme Court agreed with that, but said that means then that the expansion of Medicaid is voluntary. The tax is mandatory, but the expansion, the benefit that comes from the taxation, as a voluntary, you've got to subscribe to. And the concerns for some of the states is, okay, it's one thing to subscribe to it, but can we afford it tomorrow? Medicaid has always been kind of the big budget buster as the growth from health care demand and the rising cost of health care has impacted our budget. So the question for us was what to do. We're in the middle of the negotiations with our legislature, but we've done a couple things that are unique that we've got some waivers from the federal government. And that's ought to be a clue. If you have to get waivers on stuff, there's something wrong with the bill. I was mentioning to the dean here earlier that the reauthorization of the ESEA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, sometimes known as No Child Left Behind today. It's had many iterations since its inception back in Lyndon Baines Johnson's time. But 41 states now ask for waivers out of that program. You'd think Congress would get the clue that maybe we ought to change the law if everybody's opting out. Well, anyway, back to Medicaid. We felt like that the reason people come and get on Medicaid is because they're not making enough money. It's really a matter of economics. And so they're on government assistance. So we said at least a part of this ought to be, if we're going to do Medicaid expansion, why don't we have a work program to help people get off of government assistance and support themselves? So our proposal in Utah is when you sign up for what we call, my proposal was called Healthy Utah, you actually automatically enroll into a work program where we analyze your work skills, whether you're employed or unemployed or underemployed, and see what your skill set is so we can help you get retrained, get good education, new skills to get a better job so you can get off of government assistance and support yourself, which is what most everybody wants to do. We also designed it so that when money comes back, we send about $800+ million to Washington, D.C. in new taxes, that unless we do something, languishes in Washington, D.C. to be spent wherever, and we get all the pain of the taxes and none of the benefit of the money. So we've got a waiver and an ability for them to bring it back and put it into the private sector insurance group where people, no matter what your economic standing, have access to subsidized insurance and get the doctors and the hospitals get reimbursed at commercial rates, which is better than Medicaid, more choice and more opportunities for them to find the quality of health care that they like. We do require them to have a little skin in the game so they can pay up to 2% of the premium, not much, but 2% of the premium, not fully subsidized. When they go to the emergency room, which is too many people use emergency room services, they have to pay $50, $55 to go to an emergency room. So the idea is that if you got the sniffles, you don't need to go to the emergency room. Go see your doctor. And those aspects, coupled with the work requirement, has allowed us to come up with a very responsible program for those who need some additional health care, and it respects the taxpayers' dollars, which are getting the better bang for their buck than it would get otherwise. At the end of the day, we believe, whatever you believe Medicaid expansion is in the program of Medicaid, the Health of Utah program is better. It's better for the consumer, it's better for the taxpayer, and it provides better quality health care. So I'm hopeful. I've got it past the Senate. I'm just working on getting it past the House now.
Well, the last time a public figure spoke at Columbia about a pending bill was when Eric Garcetti spoke at Columbia College, and right after he spoke, he got word that LA had raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The City Council had passed it, so maybe the governor will get some good news after today's session. I have more questions, but what I think I'd rather do is open the floor for other questions. Yes.
Hello, Governor Herbert. Thank you for being here. My name is Michael Cedillo. I'm a second-year urban policy student here. And so though I think I heard a contradiction between you saying earlier that states should be laboratories where pilot programs are going on, and how you ended saying that states should actually be driving the agenda, I was struck by the idea of federal overreach, and we hear it a lot. And so it also struck me that, given in the New York City context, our own Mayor de Blasio seems to have these similar sort of fights with Governor Cuomo in terms of, the state not being localized or nimble enough to be able to be attuned to the needs of people in New York City. So I'm wondering if your logic that states can provide a more sophisticated understanding of the policy that's needed on the ground extends to wanting cities to have more autonomy and more authority over governing their localized issues, so places like Provo and Salt Lake City can be more attuned to their constituents.
Well, the healthy tension that exists between local government and the states has probably been there since its inception. And again, the difference is the states, which were there in the beginning, and the states created the federal government. And we got together and changed the Articles of Confederation. It wasn't the reverse. The federal government didn't create the states. But in the local communities of the states, and I used to be a local county commissioner, so I really have an appreciation for a bottom-up approach, and government closest to the people tends to reflect the people's wishes better. They are creatures of the state. The state has created these subdivisions, counties and cities, and so they do have some oversight responsibility. But there is always some little tension back and forth. It's just like we don't like the federal government micromanaging the states. The cities don't like the states micromanaging their responsibilities. And I understand that as, again, having been a former local official. We actually have pretty good relationships in Utah with our counties and our cities. They have their own organizations. They come up to the Hill. They lobby in person. There's very few hired lobbyists for the cities and the counties. The best lobbyist is the county commissioner, the mayor, councilman that comes up and talks to the legislature, the governor personally. And that works very well in Utah. When I say the state should lead, I think the state should be the laboratories of innovation. They find solutions to whatever the problems of the day are. And the problems we have in Utah may be very different than the problems they have in Arizona or California or here in New York. And I think the state should lead out on finding those solutions and not rely on the federal government coming up with a solution to whatever the problem is. The one-size-fits-all is the big problem. When Washington comes with the problem, it is, here's the solution, and everybody has to do the same thing. And it respects no differences. In Utah, I have a uniqueness for education, for example, because 70% of my land mass is owned and controlled by the Department of Interior and the Forest Service. I can't get any taxes out of it. And so I get payment in lieu of taxes called PILT, but the East Coast has no concept of that on the West. We have endangered species. We have energy issues. Most of the BTUs, for the energy of America, comes from the West. And yet some of the regulations that are imposed upon us, like hydraulic fracking, we already have regulations in place at the state level. Why do we need to have a federal redundancy on those same regulations? It doesn't make it any better. It just costs more money. And that's passed on, of course, to you, the consumer. So again, states should lead out with innovation, and if we think it's a good program, we'll adopt it. One last example. The president had a proposal that he mentioned the State of the Nation on 2 years of college being given free, community college. He got that idea from Tennessee. Governor Bill Haslam there has a 2-year program, and the difference was it cost $550 in Tennessee for the program. The president's mandate, if it would become a mandate, was going to cost about $2,500. As I talked with Secretary Duncan about this, says, Arnie, if we want to do it in Utah, we'll do it. We care about our students. We care about our education. If I think Tennessee's got this great program, I'll adopt it in some form or fashion that adapts to Utah. I don't need to have Washington, D.C. mandate to me or dictate to me this is how I'm going to do my education program. So when I say states should lead out, that's a perfect example. If it's a great program, we'll copy it or modify it. I don't need Washington to tell me what to do and how to do it.
Thank you.
Hello, Governor. My name is Kevin. I'm a first-year student here, and I want to thank you for coming here and giving this presentation.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, because before you came here, I had read that Utah has implemented in some of the public schools bilingual education, especially with Mandarin. And I know you were talking about how you want to use creative solutions to solve the next world, the 21st century problems and stuff like that. So can you please explain your program with Mandarin education and how that has helped the students of your state, you know, and preparing them for a better future and for it to be more competitive in the global marketplace?
Well, thank you. It's one of the things that are unique to Utah because we are very bilingual. Part of that's because of the Mormon missionary program that send out young men and young women for 2 years around the world. The results of that, they come back speaking a foreign language, understanding the culture, and loving the people. And so that's given us probably a leg up when it comes to international business. But we've taken it beyond that. In our educational programs now, we have immersion for different languages. Mandarin Chinese right now is one of the very big ones that we're doing, but we have French and Spanish and Portuguese that are immersion schools. We have a lot of classes, like we speak 130 languages, so there's a lot of classroom bilingual classes. But these immersion schools where little kids at 5 and 6 years of age start, and all they speak is Mandarin Chinese. And so today, 1/3 of all the Mandarin Chinese being taught in America is being taught in Utah in our schools. Again, we believe that the market has changed. It's a global marketplace, and speaking the language of the world will give us entree, one, for economic opportunity, but also fosters better relationships. It's a lot easier to do business with your friends than it is with your enemies. Well, I just got back from Hong Kong, and clearly the business leaders there say, we want to have better relations with America. They understand that the world needs it. And at least the people in Hong Kong, what we met with here 2 weeks ago, are very interested in fostering better relationships. And I think that can happen with better economic ties and economic opportunities. So it's a key for our success.
Thank you.
Hi, Governor. Thank you also as well for being here. My name's John, and I'm a second-year student. My question actually concerns redistricting. And I know as governor that during your tenure, it obviously proceeded through the decennial census and the redistricting process. And while the legislature may have an even bigger role than, say, the governor in most states, my question is this. Many academics and ordinary voters consider redistricting to be actually the single greatest threat to our country. Its negative effects are not only toxic, but they extend into every aspect of government. And what we have looking at Washington right now, the inability to pass a budget, let alone even a CR that may ultimately even just pass for 3 months, is not good. And so there are many people calling out for redistricting reform. And so my question then is, certainly in your role as chairman of the NGA, but also as a governor, do you believe that redistricting reform is in fact something that's incredibly necessary and important for this country moving forward? Iowa pops out as a key example. It's the only state that actually doesn't use political or election data in drawing their districts. So I'm interested in what your opinion is about redistricting. If you think it's currently a healthy process, it could be improved, or if you would support in your role as chair of the NGA
Sure.
a non-political redistricting process for the state.
Well, it certainly is an issue, and I think it warrants discussion, and cooler heads hopefully will prevail. It's probably, we're asking something that it would be almost impossible to do, to ask a partisan group of people to be a nonpartisan in how they redistrict. And I know a lot of states have gone to independent commissions to look at the redistricting. I think it has had some success and some not success. Depends on who you appoint to the board. You can still control it by who you appoint to the board if you want to have a partisan outcome. It's difficult in some states. Utah right now is about 3-to-1 Republican. We have a large independent group, probably 35% of the population, but as you can see, based on the numbers, by self-identification and polling, the Republicans clearly outweigh the Democrats. The question could be then, should you have just carve out a special district just for the Democrats? And if so, why would you do that? Would that really represent the people of Utah fairly? I know the last redistricting, they actually carved it up like a pie so that everybody had a little bit of everything, a little bit of Republican, a little bit of Democrat. And feeling like that everybody would have the voice with their congressional delegations that would have a balanced approach and a thought, and your feet could be held to the fire by Republican or Democrat in your district. Others don't like that. We've had some that have said, you know, they were going to challenge it in court, thought it was wrong. That petered out. So whatever's been done in Utah has been done legally. Is it the absolute best way to do it? I think there is some wisdom in having an independent commission do it. I'm not sure that they would come up with a different approach, maybe a different way to slice up the state than we have today. But it would probably eliminate some of these long fingers and the gerrymandering that sometimes takes place to put certain groups of people together and protect certain Congress men and women.
All right, thank you.
Hi there. I'm Rebecca. I'm a second-year student studying urban politics, and I want to thank you for your presentation. I'm interested in your ability to garner inclusiveness in your, for example, in your bill and bringing in the LGBT community and the religious community and creating a bill together. There seems to be a lot of stalemate in our federal government and state governments in bipartisan politics. And so I was wondering if you maybe could speak about the challenges that you faced in that bill and what are lessons that could be drawn for other policies that would require bipartisanship.
Well, thank you. And I guess we use that to illustrate the example, or use that as the example to illustrate the principle, and that is that bringing people together is probably necessary, but it's hard. And the religious rights and the gay right issue, where they have this nexus that really bumps up against each other. It seems simple in discussion, but as you start asking the questions, what does it mean to have religious freedom? And can you have religious freedom in your private life but not in your workplace? How do you address that? If you're an elected official that's been put in place, for example, performing marriages. We have clerks in the state of Utah that were there, elected to their position, and have been there, and all of a sudden the law's changed. Does that mean I have to change my belief system now? How do you address that? How about transgender people who are change while they're employed? And the employer says, that's not what I hired. And there's an issue here. How do you deal with that? What about bathroom facilities? And so there's all kinds of these issues that when you start putting flesh on the bones, it becomes difficult. And believe me, as we all probably here can appreciate, this is very emotional. Well, again, it's the good news for us in Utah was that we had religious leaders that would have been on the religious freedom side and maybe not so much on the gay rights side, say, you know what, there is a way for us to work together here and protect both from discrimination. And the fact that they were willing to sit down and come together, we'd had a precursor of that with some of our cities that passed anti-discrimination laws, which helped, I think, break trail. And then we had a legislator that was willing to sit down and in spite of maybe some preconceived ideas before, say, let me have an open mind and review this. And then, my little contribution to the thing was, if you only bring me one bill, I'll veto it. I don't care which side it is. If you bring me one bill, I will veto it. So you better get together and put it in one bill so that when I sign a bill, both sides should say, Thank you. That was not easy to do, but that was the right concept and the right process. And it took us before the legislature started and virtually for the whole 45 days of the session to get it to the point where we actually had agreement. And there's some compromise, give and take. Both sides didn't get everything they wanted. But it's been remarkable. When I was with the Western Governors Association meeting here this summer, I had 5 governors come up and say, how did you do it? How did you do this? We can't even get started in our state. And I've given the same the discussion I've given you here today, and other states are now trying to follow and emulate that process. Again, it goes back to what we're saying. The governors and the states can find solutions, and then other states can copy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we don't have a one-size-fits-all that may or may not work. And so this idea of having the states be the leaders and finding solutions to solve people's problems is good, and it works. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. Okay, sir.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a first-year student here. My question was in a similar sense, just like as a leader of the NGA, the National Governors Association, how you bring a collective voice, although there are so many differing opinions within everyone's political parties.
Well, again, you don't go into politics if you don't have probably some opinions, and probably strong opinions. You have to have a thick skin and not a faint heart to get into politics, because you're going to, no matter what you do, you're going to be criticized. I have high regard for our governors. They are good people who are out there solving problems. You have to deliver, or they'll throw you out. Governors don't last a long time. Think about it. Some are one term, 4 years. Most probably 8. Some 12. Terry Branstad, governor for life in Iowa. He's going to break the record in December for the longest serving governor in the history of the country. And but it's hard work, and you're always engaged. You can't hide. Everybody knows where I'm at today in Utah. It's on my schedule. Nobody knows where our congressmen are at. It's intense. And the fact that we can get together and share best practices and learn from each other is one that I think is very, very good and healthy. We need to have more of it. We need to, as a people, start looking to the states for solutions and quit looking to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
With that, I'd like to turn the floor back over to the Dean.
Governor, I just want to thank you on behalf of Columbia and SIPA for making time to be with us today. We spend a lot of time talking about policy here and a little less time talking about the intersection of policy and politics. You've offered us a real leadership perspective on the work of the Governors Association, your own state. Please join me in thanking Governor Herbert.